Imagine you're browsing the website for a magazine you like. You're presented with two subscription options: an internet-only subscription for $59, a print and internet subscription for $125. You weigh the options. The internet-only seems like a decent deal. The print and web seems a bit pricey. It's a tough choice, and you're not sure which to pick. Now, what if the marketing department made a small change and offered you three options instead? An internet-only subscription for $59, a print-only subscription for $125, a print and internet subscription for $125. Suddenly the choice becomes incredibly easy, doesn't it? You immediately recognize that option 2, the print-only subscription for $125, is a terrible deal. Why would anyone choose that when you can get both print and internet for the exact same price? In a flash, option 3 now looks like a fantastic bargain, and in a real-world experiment with MIT students, that's exactly what happened. A huge majority of them chose option 3. But here's the crazy part. The second, useless option was not a mistake. It was a decoy. It was a brilliantly designed piece of psychological architecture whose only job was to be so clearly inferior to another option that it would make that other option seem like the obvious rational choice. It was a tool designed to manipulate your mind without you ever realizing it. This is the strange, fascinating, and often comical world of our own minds, a world where our choices are constantly being shaped by hidden, irrational forces. And it is the world that behavioral economist Dan Ariely explores with wit and brilliance in his classic book, Predictably Irrational. Today on Geeky Philosopher, we are going on a grand tour of the glitches, the bugs, and the hidden backdoors in our own mental software. This is a scientific and philosophical journey to understand why we are not the rational creatures we think we are, and how our irrationality is not random, but perfectly and powerfully predictable. For decades, the entire field of economics and much of our society's policy-making was built on a simple and powerful assumption that human beings are rational. This imaginary creature, often called Homo economicus, or the econ, is a being of pure logic. Econs can calculate the value of anything. They have perfect self-control. They are never swayed by emotion or context. They always choose the option that is in their best self-interest. But Dan Ariely, along with a generation of behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman, is here to tell us that this creature is a complete fantasy. We are not rational econs. We are deeply irrational humans. We are biased, we are emotional, we procrastinate, we are easily swayed by the context of a decision, and we are often completely clueless about the real forces driving our choices. But here is the crucial insight of the book, and the source of its title. Our irrationality is not random. It is not just a mess of chaotic errors. It is systematic and predictable. We make the same kinds of mistakes over and over and over again. And this, Ariely argues, is actually wonderful news. Because if we can understand the predictable patterns of our own irrationality, if we can see the hidden strings that are pulling on us, then we can begin to anticipate our own mistakes. We can design our environments, our choices, and our lives in a way that protects us from our own worst instincts. The book is an exploration of these predictable patterns, and it starts with one of the most powerful forces of all: the truth about relativity. The first major force that makes us irrational is that our brains are terrible at judging the absolute value of things. We simply don't have an internal value meter that tells us how much something is worth. Instead, we understand the world by comparing one thing to another. Everything is relative. This is why the decoy effect in the intro is so powerful. By itself, you don't know if $125 for a print and web subscription is a good deal. Your brain has nothing to easily compare it to. But the moment a third, clearly inferior option is introduced, the comparison becomes effortless. Ariely shows us that this isn't just a marketing trick. It's a fundamental feature of how our brains work. He tells another wonderful story about the high-end kitchenware store, Williams-Sonoma. They introduced a new, fancy bread-making machine for $275. It was a good product, but it didn't sell well. People didn't know if it was worth the price. So Williams-Sonoma did something brilliant. They introduced a second, even bigger and more expensive bread maker for $429. This new machine was a decoy. It was a commercial flop. But sales of the original, cheaper machine nearly doubled. Why? Because now, customers had an easy comparison to make. The $275 machine no longer felt like an extravagance. It felt like a sensible, bargain-priced alternative to the deluxe model. This principle of relativity also drives our sense of envy and dissatisfaction in our own lives. We don't just want a nice house, we want a house that is slightly bigger than our brother-in-law's house. We don't just want a good salary, we want a salary that is higher than our colleagues in the next cubicle. Our happiness is often determined not by our absolute situation, but by our situation relative to the people in our immediate circle, our comparison group. This is why a person can be objectively wealthy and still feel poor if they live in a neighborhood of billionaires. The lesson here is a deeply philosophical one. The constant, automatic process of comparison is a source of immense unhappiness. By becoming aware of this powerful instinct, we can begin to consciously fight against it. We can learn to judge our own lives and our own choices based on our own internal values, not just in relation to the people around us. The next irrational force is one of the most powerful and peculiar in all of human psychology. The overwhelming, logic-destroying allure of the word free. Rationally, there should be almost no difference between an item that costs 1 cent and an item that is free. The difference is just 1 penny. But psychologically, the difference is a massive emotional chasm. The concept of zero is a powerful emotional hot button that causes our rational brains to completely shut down. Ariely conducted a simple and elegant experiment to prove this. He set up a table and offered people a choice between 2 types of chocolate, a basic Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent, or a fancy gourmet Lindt truffle for 15 cents. This was a straightforward value proposition. The Lindt truffle was a much higher quality chocolate, and at 15 cents, it was still a great bargain. Unsurprisingly, a large majority of people, about 73%, chose to buy the fancy Lindt truffle. Then the researchers made one tiny change. They lowered the price of both items by 1 cent. The Hershey's Kiss was now free, and the Lindt truffle was 14 cents. Rationally, the Lindt truffle was still the better deal. The price difference was the same. But what happened? The behavior of the crowd completely flipped. Suddenly, 69% of people chose the free Hershey's Kiss. The introduction of the word free made them abandon a clearly superior option for an inferior one. Why is free so powerful? Because it feels like it has no downside. It removes the entire possibility of loss. Our brains are deeply wired to be loss-averse. The pain of losing $1 is psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of gaining $1. The word free signals to our brain that there is no risk of making a bad choice, no possibility of regret. And that feeling is so comforting that it overrides our rational calculation of value. This is why free shipping is the most powerful marketing tool in the history of e-commerce. It makes us buy things we don't even want, just to get the free bonus. The lesson is to be incredibly suspicious of the word free. The next time you are offered something for free, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself a simple question. If this item cost just $1, would I still want it? This simple question can break the emotional spell of zero and bring your rational brain back online. Another powerful source of our irrationality is that we are constantly living in 2 different worlds at the same time, and we are terrible at keeping their rules separate. The first world is the world of market norms. This is the world of business, of prices, of wages, of costs and benefits. It is a rational, transactional world where you get what you pay for. The second world is the world of social norms. This is the world of friendship, of community, of reciprocity, of helping a neighbor move a couch. It is a warm, fuzzy, and emotional world, and it operates by a completely different set of rules. The problem, Ariely shows, is that when you introduce a market norm into a social situation, you can kill the social norm, often forever. He tells a story about a daycare center that had a problem with parents being late to pick up their children. The teachers felt taken advantage of, so the daycare decided to introduce a small fine for any parent who was more than 10 minutes late. Rationally, this should have solved the problem. It created a clear disincentive, but the opposite happened. Late pickups actually increased. Why? Because the fine had taken the transaction out of the world of social norms. I should be on time because it's the right thing to do, and I don't want to disrespect the teachers, and put it squarely in the world of market norms. I can now pay for the privilege of being late. It's just another service that the daycare provides. They had replaced a social moral obligation with a simple market transaction, and it completely backfired. Even worse, when they removed the fine later, the late pickups remained high. The social norm, once broken, did not return. The lesson is that you have to be incredibly careful about mixing these 2 worlds. You can't buy the loyalty of your employees, or the love of your partner with money. Some of the most valuable things in life operate on the logic of the social world, and the moment you try to put a price on them, you can destroy their value forever. Predictably Irrational is a witty, fascinating, and deeply humbling book. It is a grand tour of the many glitches, the biases, and the strange quirks of our mental software. It shows us, with clever experiments and compelling stories, that we are not the rational, logical beings we like to think we are. We are constantly being influenced by forces we do not see, by the power of comparison, by the lure of free, by the clash between our social and market selves. But the message of the book is not one of despair. It is not a cynical condemnation of our flawed minds. It is a message of empowerment. By understanding the predictable patterns of our own irrationality, we can begin to anticipate our own mistakes. We can become the architects of our own choices. We can design our environments, our decisions, and our lives in a way that protects us from our own worst instincts. The book is a profound call for a more realistic and more compassionate view of human nature. We are not perfect logical machines. We are flawed, wonderful, and predictably irrational humans. And accepting that is the first step to making wiser choices and living a better life. This book is a journey into the hidden back alleys of your own mind. It is a call to become a more curious and more skeptical observer of your own choices, and a more compassionate observer of the choices of others. If you are a student of the human condition, someone who is dedicated to understanding your own cognitive biases in order to live a more rational and intentional life, then you are a student of this work. Consider subscribing to Geeky Philosopher, where we are dedicated to exploring the hidden forces that shape our lives. Thank you for your time.